They laughed as they beat him in front of everyone. That was the part he would remember most. Not the first blow, not the taste of blood that rushed into his mouth when his cheek split against the gravel, not even the pain in his ribs when a boot struck him hard enough to make the air leave his body. It was the laughter of boys he had once sat beside in school, the laughter of women standing in doorways with folded arms, the laughter of men who should have stepped forward and stopped it, the laughter of a town that had already decided what he was worth. And above all, the silence that lived beneath that laughter, cold, deliberate, almost holy in its cruelty, as if everyone present had come to an agreement without ever speaking it aloud. This boy could be broken, and no one would pay a price for it. The road baked under the afternoon sun, white and merciless. Heat shimmered over the cracked surface. Dust rose under restless feet and settled on skin, on shirts, on faces, on shame. The market had begun to thin, but not enough. There was still enough eyes, enough witnesses, enough mouths that would carry the story into every lane, every shop, every yard before nightfall. Enough people to make certain he would never live it down. The boy on the ground was named Daniel Blake. He was 14 years old. He had his mother's eyes, though few people noticed that now. They had once been soft eyes, watchful and intelligent, with the habit of holding on to questions long after everyone else had moved on. But that afternoon, they had become the eyes of an animal cornered in the open, wide, stunned, and trying to understand how quickly the world could turn from hard to monstrous. The first stone had not been thrown by an enemy. It had been thrown by someone he knew. That was how such things often began. Not with strangers, never with strangers. Cruelty was most efficient when it wore a familiar face. Daniel had been standing near the edge of the market square with a cardboard tray of small goods balanced against his chest: matches, chewing gum, packets of peanuts, sewing needles, 2 bars of soap, and 3 tiny bottles of cooking oil. He had been trying, in the quiet way he always tried, to make enough money before evening to help his mother buy rice and kerosene. He had been calling softly to passers-by, offering what little he had with a politeness that seemed almost old-fashioned for someone his age. Then Carlton Shaw arrived. Carlton was 16 and already carried himself like someone the world had promised would never truly punish him. He was broad in the shoulder, handsome in the careless way that made adults forgive him too quickly, and dangerous in the deeper way that only those beneath him understood. His father owned one of the larger hardware stores near the junction. His uncle sat on committees and spoke loudly at funerals and public meetings. People called the family respectable. What they meant was that the family had money, influence, and the right surnames attached to the right favors. Carlton did not walk alone. He never did. There were always boys around him, boys who laughed before he finished a joke, boys who mistook fear for admiration, boys who would one day claim they had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, though all of them knew exactly how often they placed themselves at his side when something ugly was about to happen. Daniel saw them before they reached him. He felt the small tightening inside his chest. He had felt it many times before. Not because there had already been beatings, not like this, but there had been taunts, shoves, stolen goods, public embarrassment delivered in small, casual cuts. The sort of cruelty that did not leave a case for the police, only a stain on a boy's spirit. Carlton stopped directly in front of him. The square shifted around them. Conversation softened. Heads turned. Daniel knew, with the speed of instinct, that every path out had just narrowed. "What are you selling today?" Carlton asked. The question sounded mild enough, but his smile was wrong. Daniel swallowed. "Household things, snacks, soap?" Carlton glanced at the tray. "You look like a beggar dressed like a shop." The boys with him laughed. Daniel kept his eyes lowered. He had learned that looking directly at certain people could be mistaken for defiance. "I am just trying to sell," he said. "Trying?" Carlton repeated.
Is that what you call this?" He reached down, lifted one packet of peanuts, turned it over in his fingers as if inspecting something distasteful, then dropped it deliberately into the dust. Daniel moved on instinct, bending to pick it up. That was when Carlton shoved the tray. Everything fell. Soap bars tumbled into dirt, bottles rolled, matches scattered, peanuts burst from split packets, needles disappeared at once into the powdery ground. A bottle of oil struck a stone and cracked open, leaving a dark stain that spread quickly beneath the afternoon light. There was another wave of laughter. Daniel stared at the mess as if his mind refused to accept how sudden ruin could be. Those goods represented more than money. They represented hours of walking, humiliation swallowed, hunger delayed, hope measured in coins too small for anyone else to care about. He dropped to his knees. A woman buying yams nearby clicked her tongue, but whether in pity or annoyance was impossible to tell. Daniel began to gather what he could. Carlton planted one foot on a bar of soap before Daniel's hand reached it. "Careful," Carlton said softly. "You might scratch yourself on success." Again, the laughter. Something passed through Daniel then, something small but dangerous, a flicker of heat that rose from somewhere below fear. He looked up, only for a second, only long enough for Carlton to see it. That was all it took. "What was that look?" Carlton asked. Daniel shook his head. "Nothing." "What was that look?" "It was nothing." Carlton's smile vanished. The boys around him straightened with alert delight. The square sharpened. A few people began drifting closer, not to intervene, but to see better. Daniel sensed the turn too late. Carlton kicked the tray aside. "You think because people let you walk around here, you are somebody?" "No." "No?" Carlton took a step closer. "Then why are you looking at me like that?" "I was not." The slap came so quickly Daniel barely saw the movement. His head snapped sideways. The sound cut across the market. A child near a fruit stand started crying. Daniel tasted iron. He did not fall, but the square tilted. Carlton leaned in. "Do not ever look at me as if we are equal." That sentence, more than the slap, changed everything. Because it was never about a look. It was about position, about rank, about the silent social architecture of a place where everybody knew who was allowed dignity and who was expected to survive without it. Daniel tried to rise. Carlton shoved him back down. One of the other boys snatched a bottle from the ground and tossed it over the nearby drain. Another stomped on a packet of gum. Another kicked dirt over the remaining goods, as if burying them. Somebody laughed so hard he bent over. Still, nobody stopped it. On the opposite side of the road, an old tailor watched from his doorway. Two women from the district post office stood shoulder to shoulder under a faded awning. A vendor who knew Daniel's mother for years looked away and began rearranging tomatoes that didn't need rearranging. It wasn't that the town didn't see, it was that the town had made peace with what it saw. Daniel rose again, slower now. He should have walked away. Years later, he would understand that survival sometimes required retreat, and that retreat was not always cowardice. But at 14, in front of a crowd, with humiliation already stripping him raw, something stubborn and wounded kept him there. "This is all I have," he said, his voice unsteady. "Please stop." Carlton stared at him. Then he laughed, a low, disbelieving laugh, as though Daniel had committed some ridiculous error by speaking like a human being whose losses mattered. "Did you hear that?" Carlton asked the others. "He is giving orders now." No one answered, but the mood shifted higher, sharper. The boys circled closer. Someone behind Daniel shoved him between the shoulders. He stumbled. Another foot clipped his ankle. He fell to one knee. Then the first punch landed. Later, people would describe the beating in many ways. Some would call it a fight, because that word made everyone feel less guilty. Some would say Daniel provoked them because people prefer stories that protect the powerful from accountability. Some would say boys will be boys, that tempers flare, that unfortunate things happen under heat and pride. But none of those versions would be true. It was not a fight. A fight suggests equal will, equal strength, equal risk. This was a performance of dominance, a public lesson, an announcement. And the town, whether knowingly or not, served as its audience. Daniel raised his arms too late. A fist hit the side of his face. Another struck his stomach. Pain burst through him in hot, disorganized flashes. He heard rather than saw the movement around him, shoes scraping, breath grunting, boys feeding each other's aggression. Someone caught them.
The letter felt heavier than it should have, as if the paper carried something far beyond ink. Daniel sat at the small wooden table, the dim glow of the kerosene lamp stretching shadows across the room. The night outside had settled into a deep stillness, the kind that makes every small sound feel louder than it is. Even the usual noises drifting through the district seemed distant, as if the world itself had stepped back to listen. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. "To my son, if the day ever comes." Those words echoed in his mind. He unfolded the letter slowly, carefully, as though rushing might cause something inside it to break. The handwriting was unmistakable, firm, controlled, deliberate. It was the writing of a man who meant every word he put on paper. For a moment, Daniel did not see the room around him. He saw his father, or at least the memory of him. He began to read. "If you are reading this, then something has already gone wrong. I hoped you would never need to know these things. I hoped your life would be simpler than mine. But I know the kind of men who hold power, and I know they do not forget easily." Daniel's chest tightened. The words did not feel like a warning meant for the future. They felt like something already unfolding. "If they have reached you, it means they never truly stopped." He paused. A faint chill ran through him. The beating in the market replayed in his mind, the laughter, the silence, the way no one had stepped forward. At the time, it had felt like cruelty. Now, it felt like something else, something planned. He kept reading. "There was land before you were born, land that held value, more than people understood at the time. We were told it would bring opportunity. We were told it would benefit everyone. But those promises were not made to be kept. They were made to quiet us." Daniel leaned forward slightly. The lamp flickered. The Shaw family was at the center of it, not alone, but deeply involved. Decisions were made long before anyone was invited to speak. Money moved quietly. Papers were signed under pressure, and those who resisted were dealt with in ways that left no proof, only consequence. Daniel's grip tightened around a letter. He could hear his own breathing now, slow, heavy. "Your father was one of the men who refused to step aside." The words felt heavier than anything that had come before. Daniel swallowed hard. At first, the pressure was subtle. Work became scarce. People avoided me. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. It was not open conflict. It was isolation. That is how power begins to remove you, quietly, so others learn without being told. Daniel's mind flashed back again to the market, to the way people had watched, to the way no one had helped, to the way it had all felt accepted. Then came the warnings, not loud, not direct, but clear enough for a man who understands danger. I was told to let things go. I was told to think about my family. I was told to be wise. He could almost hear the tone behind those words, calm, controlled,
dangerous. I did not stop. I believed that truth mattered. I believed that if enough of us stood firm, things would change. I believed that justice would eventually win. Daniel's eyes moved slower now. I was wrong. The sentence sat there, heavy and final. Or perhaps I was simply ahead of my time. That is something you will have to decide for yourself. Daniel's chest rose and fell slowly. He continued. A meeting was arranged. I was told we would resolve everything. But you must understand something clearly, my son. When powerful men invite you to discuss your future, they have already decided it. Daniel looked up. His mother sat across from him, silent, watching. Her eyes confirmed what the letter was saying without her needing to speak. I went anyway. That was the last day I believed fairness was still part of the conversation. After that, everything changed. Daniel's throat felt dry. The land was taken, not by agreement, but by force disguised as legality. Money disappeared, not lost, moved, and the people who benefited became stronger, more protected, more untouchable. He lowered the paper slightly, just enough to breathe, then continued. If they have come for you, it is not because of anything you did. It is because of who you are. My name did not disappear when I died. It was buried, and buried things have a way of rising again. Daniel felt something shift inside him, slow, cold, real. You must learn the difference between weakness and patience. Weakness accepts what should never be accepted. Patience chooses the right moment to act. The words settled deep, deeper than fear, deeper than pain. There are things I cannot write here. Your mother will guide you. Listen carefully. Watch everything. Speak less than you know. And remember, power is not always loud. The most dangerous kind is often quiet. Daniel read the final lines slowly. If this day has come, your life will not be simple, but it does not have to be small. The letter ended. The room fell into silence, not an empty silence, a full one. Daniel lowered the paper into his lap. For a long moment, he said nothing. The beating no longer felt like a random act. Carlton's words echoed in his mind again. Do not ever look at me as if we are equal. Now it made sense. That was not just arrogance. It was inheritance. It was history speaking through him. This was not just about today, Daniel said quietly. His mother shook her head. No. They knew who I was. They always knew. The answer landed harder than anything else. Daniel stared at her. For how long? She hesitated, then spoke carefully. For longer than you think. A strange feeling crept into his chest. Not fear, something sharper. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes softened, but there was weight behind them. Because I wanted you to have a chance to be just a boy. Daniel looked away. That chance was gone now, completely. She reached into the envelope and placed the folded document on the table. This is where everything begins, she said. Daniel looked at it. What is it? A record of what was taken. The words felt final, like a door opening. Outside, a car passed slowly along the road, too slowly. Daniel's body tensed without him thinking about it. The engine idled for a moment, then continued on, but the feeling it left behind stayed. His mother leaned closer, her voice low. From tonight, you must understand something. He looked at her. Nothing that happens next will be by accident. Daniel nodded slowly. The pain in his body was still there, but something else had taken its place. Clarity. Whatever this was, it had started long before him, and whether he wanted it or not, he was now part of it. He picked up the document,
and without realizing it, the boy who had been beaten in the market began to disappear. Something else was beginning to take shape in his place.
The night did not fall gently. It pressed itself down over the town like a warning. By the time Daniel finished reading the letter, something invisible had already shifted. The air inside the small house felt tighter, as if the walls themselves understood that whatever had been hidden was no longer safe. Marcia did not speak for a long time. She sat across from him, her hands resting on the table, her eyes fixed on something deeper than the room itself. Daniel watched her carefully, noticing for the first time not just her strength, but the weight she had been carrying alone for years. "You cannot stay here," she said at last. The words did not sound like a suggestion, they sounded like a decision already made. Daniel frowned, his body still aching from the beating. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said slowly, choosing each word, "they have seen you now." The statement settled heavily. "They have always known about you," she continued, "but knowing from a distance and seeing you stand in front of them, those are not the same thing." Daniel felt a quiet resistance rise in him. "I am not running." Marcia's eyes lifted sharply. "This is not running." Her voice was firm now. "This is survival." Daniel leaned back slightly, wincing from the pain in his ribs. "So I just leave? Just like that?" Her gaze softened, but only slightly. "Do you think your father stayed because he was afraid to leave?" The question hit him harder than the blows earlier that day. "He stayed because he believed he could win from here," she said, "but the world he was fighting was already decided against him." The room fell quiet again. Daniel looked down at the letter, at the words, at the weight of everything he had just learned. "And you think they will come again?" he asked. Marcia did not hesitate. "Yes." The certainty in her voice removed any illusion that this was temporary. A sound broke the silence, soft at first, then clearer, a vehicle slowing outside. Daniel's head turned instantly. The engine did not stop completely. It lingered, rolling slowly, watching. Neither of them moved. The light from the lamp flickered again, casting long shadows across the walls. Then, just as quietly, the vehicle moved on. But the message had already been delivered. They were no longer unseen. Marcia stood abruptly. "We do not have time." Her voice had changed. It was no longer reflective. It was urgent. She moved quickly through the room, pulling a small bag from beneath the bed, opening drawers, gathering clothes, documents, a few carefully folded bills. Daniel watched her in silence. Everything was happening too fast. "This is not how this was supposed to happen," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to him. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked. "I am sending you away." The words landed like a final verdict. "Where?" "To someone who can keep you safe." Daniel stood slowly, ignoring the pain. "I am not leaving you." Marcia stopped, turned, walked toward him, and for the first time that night, her voice broke. "You are not leaving me," she said. "I am protecting you." The emotion in her words cut through everything else. Daniel felt it in his chest, in his throat, in the part of him that still wanted to believe he could stay and fight without losing everything. "You think I can protect you here?" she continued. "After what happened today? After what your father tried to do?" He said nothing, because deep down, he already knew the answer. She stepped closer, placed her hand gently against his face, careful of the swelling. "You are not ready yet," she whispered. The words were not an insult, they were truth. "And if you stay, they will make sure you never become ready." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. A quiet storm moved inside him. Fear, anger, confusion, and something else beginning to form beneath all of it. Understanding. "Where will I go?" he asked finally.
Marcia exhaled slowly. "There is someone your father trusted, someone far from here." Daniel opened his eyes. "How far?" She met his gaze. "Far enough that they cannot reach you easily." The answer was enough, and not enough. Minutes passed in a blur, clothes packed, documents folded, the letter carefully placed back into the envelope. Every movement carried urgency, but also precision. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. Outside, the night deepened further, the kind of night where decisions change lives. When everything was ready, Marcia tied the bag closed and placed it into Daniel's hands. It felt lighter than it should have, because it carried everything he was allowed to take with him. "Listen to me," she said. Her voice was steady again, focused. "From the moment you leave here, you must become someone else." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said carefully, "you must learn how to move without being seen." The words settled deep. Do not speak more than you need to. Do not trust quickly. Watch people before you decide who they are. Each sentence felt like instruction, like preparation. "For what?" Daniel asked quietly. Marcia held his gaze. "For the life that is waiting for you." The silence that followed was heavy. Then she added almost softly, "And for the day you come back." Daniel felt something shift again, return. The idea planted itself quietly, but firmly. A distant sound broke the moment, this time footsteps, approaching, slow, measured. Daniel's body tensed instantly. Marcia turned toward the door. Neither of them moved. The footsteps stopped just outside. A knock followed, not loud, not aggressive, but certain. Marcia did not move immediately. Then she walked to the door, opened it slowly. A man stood there, older, calm, eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He did not step inside. He simply looked at Marcia, then at Daniel. "It is time," he said. No explanation, no introduction, just certainty. Marcia nodded once. She turned back to Daniel. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The danger, the past, the future. All that remained was a mother and her son. She stepped forward and pulled him into her arms. He did not resist. He held on, tightly, as if letting go would break something that could never be repaired. "You must become stronger than what they expect," she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly. "But do not lose who you are." Daniel nodded against her shoulder, though he did not fully understand how both things could be true. She pulled back slowly, her hands lingering on his arms, her eyes memorizing his face. "Go," she said. The word nearly broke him, but he turned, because now he understood. Staying was not courage, leaving was. He stepped out into the night. The air felt different, colder, heavier. The man beside him said nothing. They began to walk, away from the house, away from the only life he had ever known. Daniel did not look back immediately, but after a few steps, he did. His mother still stood in the doorway, small, still, watching. Then the darkness swallowed the space between them, and just like that, he was gone. By morning, the town would have its version of the story. Some would say he ran away, others would say the beating broke him, some would not speak of him at all, and the ones who had laughed, they would move on as if nothing had ever happened. But far from that town, on a road no one there could see, a different story had already begun, one built not on humiliation, but on transformation, and the boy they believed had disappeared was only just beginning.
Time did not heal Daniel. It hardened him. The first year felt like a wound that refused to close. Every morning he woke up in a place that was not home, surrounded by unfamiliar walls, unfamiliar voices, unfamiliar rules.
The man who had taken him away that night delivered him to a quiet town, far from everything he had known, to a house that felt more like a training ground than a refuge. There was no comfort waiting for him there, only expectation. The man who received him was called Mr. Bennet. He was not unkind, but he was not gentle either. He looked at Daniel the way a blacksmith looks at iron, not for what it is, but for what it could become under pressure. "You are not here to hide," Mr. Bennet said the first morning. Daniel stood silently, still carrying the weight of everything he had lost. "You are here to prepare." That was the first lesson, and it never changed. The days began early, before sunrise, before comfort, before thought had time to settle. Daniel learned quickly that weakness was not punished with anger. It was ignored, and being ignored was worse. So he adapted, at first out of survival, later out of purpose. He ran until his lungs burned. He worked until his hands hardened. He studied until his eyes ached and words blurred into each other. There was no applause, no recognition, only quiet correction. Again, better, faster, stronger. The pain from the beating faded, but something deeper replaced it. Discipline. It did not come easily. It was built, day by day, choice by choice, failure by failure. There were nights he wanted to quit, nights when the memory of his mother standing in the doorway returned so vividly it felt like a physical ache in his chest. Nights when the laughter from the market echoed so loudly in his mind that sleep became impossible. But those were the nights that shaped him most, because quitting would have meant accepting that they were right about him, and Daniel was no longer willing to accept anything they had decided for him. Years passed, not quickly, but relentlessly. The boy who arrived broken did not disappear overnight. He was rebuilt slowly, carefully, deliberately. Mr. Bennet did not teach him just how to survive. He taught him how the world actually worked. "You think power is money?" he asked one evening. Daniel hesitated. "It helps." Mr. Bennet shook his head slightly. "Money is a tool, not power." Daniel frowned. "Then what is power?" Mr. Bennet leaned back. "Information, timing, position." The words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Daniel began to see things differently. Not just what people said, but what they did not say. Not just what was visible, but what was hidden. He learned how decisions were made before they were announced, how influence moved quietly through conversations that never reached public ears, how the most dangerous people rarely raised their voices. They simply changed outcomes. He studied business, law, people, patterns. Every lesson connected to something larger, every skill built towards something he could not yet fully see, but could feel. The anger inside him did not disappear. It changed. It became controlled, focused, useful. That was the second transformation. Pain into purpose, emotion into strategy, reaction into patience. By the 5th year, Daniel was no longer reacting to life. He was observing it, measuring it, learning from it. He began working under Mr. Bennet in small ways, handling tasks, managing details, watching negotiations, listening more than speaking, always listening. He noticed things others missed, small inconsistencies, patterns in behavior, weakness in confidence, and slowly, he began to understand something most people never do. Power was not given, it was built and protected. By the 7th year, he had changed completely, physically, mentally, emotionally. He was no longer the boy from the market, but he had not forgotten him either. That memory remained, sharp, untouched. The laughter, the silence, Carlton's voice. They did not fade. They refined him. One night, as they sat across from each other, Mr. Bennet studied him carefully. "You are ready to understand the final part," he said. Daniel did not respond immediately. He had learned not to rush answers. "What part?" he asked. Mr. Bennet leaned forward slightly. "You are not just rebuilding your life." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are positioning yourself." The words landed deeper than anything before. "For what?" Mr. Bennet held his gaze. "For the moment when the past and the present meet." Silence filled the space between them. Then he added, "And when that happens, you will not be reacting. You will be deciding." Something inside Daniel shifted again. Not emotion, alignment. Everything he had been through, everything he had learned, everything he had endured, it was not random. It was preparation. The 10th year came quietly. No celebration, no announcement, just a realization. Daniel stood one morning, looking at his reflection, and for the first time, he did not see the boy who had been beaten. He saw something else, controlled, calm, capable, dangerous, not because of violence, but because of understanding, because of patience, because of what he now knew how to do. Mr. Bennet entered the room, looked at him once, and nodded. "It is time." Daniel did not ask what that meant. He already knew. The years of silence were over. The preparation was complete. The distance between who he was and who he needed to become had finally closed. And somewhere far away, in a town that believed he had been erased, the past was still waiting, unfinished, unaware, and completely unprepared for what was coming back to meet it.
The town had not changed. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. The road still cracked under the same heat. The market still breathed with the same restless rhythm. Vendors called out in familiar patterns. Conversations rose and fell in the same tones. Even the dust seemed unchanged, lifting and settling exactly as it had 10 years before. But something else had. Him. He stood at the edge of the town for a long moment, saying nothing, doing nothing, simply observing. No one recognized him. That was expected. The boy who had been beaten in the market no longer existed in any visible way. The years had reshaped him completely. His posture alone spoke differently now, measured, composed, controlled. There was no hesitation in the way he stood, no uncertainty in the way he looked at the world. But his eyes had not forgotten. They moved slowly across the streets, taking in every detail. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt different, because now he understood it. He understood how power moved here. He understood who mattered and why. He understood where decisions were made before they ever became visible. And most importantly, he understood how to enter without being seen. He did not go home first. He did not go to the place where his mother had once stood in the doorway watching him disappear into the night. Instead, he went where power lived, quietly, indirectly, patiently. The first sign of his return did not come from him. It came from his name. It appeared in places where it did not belong, on documents, in conversations, attached to opportunities that had not existed before. At first, it meant nothing, just another name, another presence in a system already filled with them. But then it appeared again, and again, and again, until people began to notice, not loudly, not publicly, but in the quiet way that matters more. Who is that? Where did he come from? Who is backing him? Those questions moved faster than answers, and in places like that town, questions were the beginning of attention. Daniel moved carefully.
Every step was intentional, every action measured. He did not announce himself. He did not seek recognition. He allowed the system to discover him instead. That was the difference between power and noise. Noise demanded attention. Power attracted it. Within weeks, his presence began to ripple outward. A small investment here, a quiet partnership there. Land discussions reopened, old documents resurfaced, names that had not been spoken in years began to circulate again, and slowly, the past began to move. The Shaw family heard his name before they ever saw his face. At first, it was dismissed. Just another businessman, just another outsider trying to enter a space already controlled. But then something changed. The name did not disappear. It remained, persistent, strategic, connected to things that should not have been easily accessible. That was when attention shifted. Carlton Shaw was no longer a boy. He had grown into the kind of man people expected him to become, confident, influential, protected by legacy and reinforced by years of unchallenged authority. He sat in his office one afternoon reviewing a document that had crossed his desk unexpectedly. A proposal, clean, precise, impossible to ignore. The name attached to it stopped him. Daniel Blake. He read it once, then again. The name felt familiar, but distant, like something from another life. He leaned back slightly, thinking. Then he dismissed it. It could not be the same person. That boy had been nothing. The memory barely held weight anymore. But something about the name lingered, uncomfortable, unresolved. Across town, whispers began to spread, not loud enough to become gossip, but strong enough to become awareness. Someone new is moving things. Deals are shifting. Old files are being reopened. Daniel watched it all unfold without stepping forward. He remained just outside visibility, close enough to influence, far enough to remain undefined. He visited the market once, not during the day, at dusk, when the crowds had thinned and the noise had softened. He stood in the same space where everything had changed 10 years before. The same ground, the same space, but not the same reality. He did not feel anger, not the kind he knew. What he felt was something else entirely. Clarity, understanding, control. The past no longer owned him, but it had shaped him, and now it would answer to him. He turned and walked away. No one noticed, but the moment mattered, because it marked the point where memory stopped being pain and became purpose. Days later, Carlton heard the name again. This time, it was not on paper. It was spoken, in a meeting, in a tone that carried weight. He is not someone to ignore. Carlton's expression changed slightly. That was the first real shift. Not fear, but attention. And attention was the beginning of disruption. Daniel moved carefully. He did not rush. He allowed the pressure to build naturally. That was the strategy. Let the system feel him before it sees him. Let uncertainty grow. Let questions multiply. Because uncertainty weakens even the strongest positions. And when the time came, he would no longer be an unknown name. He would be a force already embedded in everything that mattered. One evening, as the sun lowered and the town slipped into its familiar rhythm, Daniel stood overlooking it from a distance. The same town, the same people, the same structures. But now, he saw every weakness, every pattern, every opening. And for the first time since his return, he spoke aloud, quietly, calmly. Now they will remember. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the words away, but not the meaning, because what had begun as a return was no longer just a return. It was a reckoning, and the town that once watched him fall had no idea how close it was to watching him rise.
The shift did not happen all at once. It never does.
At first, it was subtle, a hesitation in conversations that were once confident, a delay in decisions that had always been immediate, a quiet uncertainty where there had once been control. People could not explain it, but they felt it. Something had changed, and it was moving closer. Daniel did not rush. He had not spent 10 years learning patience just to abandon it at the moment it mattered most. He understood something the others did not. Power does not strike when it is ready. It strikes when the other side is no longer prepared. The first fracture appeared inside the Shaw network itself. A document surfaced, not publicly, not loudly, but in the right place, in the hands of the right person. A legal record, old, forgotten, or at least believed to be forgotten. It showed signatures, movements of money, transfers that did not match the official story. It did not accuse, it did not explain, it simply existed. And that was enough, because truth does not need to shout when it is placed correctly. Carlton saw it first, not through Daniel, but through someone he trusted, a man who had stood beside him for years, a man who now looked at him differently. "What is this?" the man asked quietly. Carlton scanned the document. His expression did not change immediately, but something inside him tightened. "This is nothing," he said, but the words did not carry weight, because both of them knew that if it truly was nothing, it would not be here, it would not be moving, it would not be resurfacing after so many years. The man said nothing more, but silence can be louder than accusation, and that silence began to spread. Daniel watched it happen from a distance. Every reaction, every shift, every moment of doubt. He had learned long ago that you do not destroy a structure by attacking it directly. You weaken the parts that hold it together, and then you let it collapse under its own weight. More information followed, carefully placed, never all at once, never enough to expose everything, just enough to create pressure, questions, doubt, division. People began to speak in lower voices, meetings became longer, decisions became cautious, and slowly, the confidence that once defined the powerful began to fade. Carlton felt it most, not because he understood everything, but because he understood enough. Something was happening, something intentional, and for the first time in his life, he did not control it. That was when the name returned, not on paper this time, not in passing conversation, but directly. Daniel Blake, spoken clearly, without hesitation. Carlton sat in silence after hearing it. The memory came back slowly. A boy, a market, laughter, a moment that had once meant nothing. Now it felt like the beginning of something he should have paid attention to. "That is not possible," he said, but the man across the table did not agree. "It is already happening," he replied. Carlton leaned back, thinking. For the first time, he was not certain, and uncertainty is where fear begins. The confrontation did not happen in public. Daniel would not allow that. Public humiliation had been the weapon used against him. He would not repeat it. He would replace it with something far more powerful: control. The meeting was arranged quietly. No announcements, no attention, just presence. Carlton entered the room first, confident, but not fully steady. He did not know what to expect, and that alone was unfamiliar territory. Daniel entered moments later, calm, composed, unhurried. Carlton looked at him, really looked this time, and recognition hit. Not immediately, but deeply. "You," he said. Daniel did not respond. He simply took his seat. Silence filled the space between them, heavy, measured, controlled. Carlton leaned forward slightly. "This is what this is about?" Daniel's voice, when it came, was steady. "This is not about what you think." Carlton's eyes narrowed. "Then explain it." Daniel held his gaze. "For 10 years you lived as if nothing happened. You believed that moment had no consequence." Carlton's jaw tightened slightly. It didn't. Daniel tilted his head just slightly. "That is where you were wrong." The words settled into the room. Carlton said nothing, because for the first time, he could not immediately dismiss what he was hearing. Daniel continued, "You thought it was just a boy." Another pause. "You thought it ended there." Carlton leaned back. "And it didn't?" Daniel's expression did not change. "It started there." The silence that followed was different, not empty, not uncertain, final. Daniel reached into his folder and placed a document on the table, then another and another, each one precise, each one connected, each one impossible to ignore. Carlton looked at them, then back at Daniel. His confidence shifted, not gone, but no longer absolute. "What do you want?" he asked. Daniel leaned back slightly. For the first time, there was something else in his presence. Not anger, not revenge, authority. "I want the truth acknowledged," he said. Carlton's expression hardened. "That is not how this works." Daniel nodded slowly. "You are right." A pause. "It is not how it used to work." The difference was clear and undeniable. Carlton looked at the documents again. For the first time, he saw risk, real risk, not the kind that could be ignored, not the kind that could be dismissed, the kind that changes outcomes. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked. Daniel's answer came without hesitation. "Then everything continues." Carlton frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" Daniel met his eyes. "It means you will spend the rest of your life reacting to something you cannot control." The words landed with quiet force, because they were true. Carlton felt it, even if he did not admit it. The room fell silent again. This time, it was Carlton who was thinking, calculating, measuring. The roles had completely reversed, and both of them knew it. Daniel stood slowly. The meeting was over, not because everything had been resolved, but because everything had been decided. 10 years ago, Daniel said quietly, "you believed I was nothing." He paused. "And that belief cost you everything you were about to lose." Carlton did not respond. He could not, because for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be on the other side of power. Daniel turned and walked out. No anger, no raised voice, no need. The damage had already been done. Outside, the town continued as it always had, unaware, unchanged. But beneath the surface, everything was different, because the story that had once been buried was no longer hidden, and the boy they had laughed at had returned to something they could not control. Days later, the changes became visible. Positions shifted, alliances broke, decisions reversed, and slowly, the structure that once seemed untouchable began to bend. Daniel did not celebrate. He did not announce victory, because this was never about revenge. It was about balance. It was about truth. It was about restoring what had been taken and correcting what had been ignored. One evening, he returned to the same place where everything had started, the market, the ground where he had once fallen. He stood there quietly, no crowd, no attention, just memory. But this time, the memory did not hurt. It reminded him of who he had been, of what he had survived, of what he had become, and for the first time, he allowed himself to breathe, fully, calmly, freely. The laughter was gone, replaced by something far more powerful, respect. Not spoken, not announced, but understood. And in that quiet moment, the story reached its end, not with noise, not with destruction, but with something far greater, control. Because in the end, the boy they beat and humiliated did return, but not for revenge. He returned as the one who could decide what happened next.